The in-laws used her, mocked her, made her clean, then kicked her out. Part 1. Chapter 1, The Wedding No One Wanted. The chapel was drenched in golden light, with petals scattered across the aisle and violins swelling in a romantic crescendo, a scene plucked from a bridal magazine. But the warmth of the decor clashed brutally with the cold stares in the pews. She walked alone. No father by her side. No mother wiping tears of joy in the front row. Just her, in a satin gown that shimmered like liquid pearl, holding her chin high as every eye in the room tried to drill holes through her pride. From the very first step, the whispers began. She's not even from the city. Did you hear her mother ran a laundromat? Bet she's marrying him for the money. The judgment in the air was so thick it nearly fogged her veil. But she kept walking. Each step was a silent act of defiance. At the end of the aisle stood her groom, dashing, yes, but looking ever so slightly hesitant. As though standing there was an obligation, not a declaration of love. He smiled, but the corners of his mouth twitched like someone trying too hard to act thrilled. To his left stood the bride's soon-to-be mother-in-law, Cecilia, in an emerald gown more expensive than the bride's entire wardrobe. She didn't smile. Her eyes narrowed as the bride approached, scanning her up and down like she was dirt dragged in on designer heels. Next to Cecilia stood Anya, the groom's younger sister, her arms crossed and lips curled in a smirk that screamed, "She'll never be one of us." Her best friend leaned over and muttered something that made Anya snort. The bride didn't flinch, but she heard it. Poor girl probably bought her dress on credit. Still, she walked. The vows were read. The rings exchanged. The kiss happened brief, like a contract signed. The applause was polite, sparse, almost resentful. After the ceremony, the guests filtered out to the reception hall like it was a chore. Nobody approached her for congratulations. Instead, they flocked to Cecilia, kissing cheeks, and gushing about the floral arrangements she had chosen as if she were the bride. Anya posed for selfies while the bride stood in the corner with a glass of champagne she hadn't touched. The groom had already disappeared into a crowd of old college friends, leaving her to face an ocean of cold shoulders. Lovely ceremony, someone said with a smile that didn't reach their eyes. You looked simple. Understated. Another added, I hear you were studying literature? How charming. What do you plan to do with that? She smiled, nodding, pretending not to notice that they referred to her gown as brave and her bouquet as quaint. She pretended not to hear the snide remarks about how rural girls have good work ethic and how some families just raise good wives. She pretended not to see Cecilia whispering to her son with a hand on his arm, eyes flicking over to her like she was a business deal gone wrong. But through it all, she kept one thing firmly in her mind. They had no idea she wasn't just some girl from nowhere. They didn't know she co-owned the very estate they lived in. They didn't know the house where they would soon try to rule over her had her name engraved on the deed. They didn't know she wasn't marrying into wealth, she was wealth. And they were about to treat her like a maid in her own kingdom. But not yet. Not tonight. Tonight, she would play the part. Because the real show hadn't even started. Chapter 2, The Welcome Gift. The honeymoon was brief, a sleek, 2-day getaway at the family's mountain estate, shared with 4 other relatives and a dog that hated her. There were no beach strolls, no champagne-soaked nights, no stolen moments under the stars. Just an endless stream of relatives offering unsolicited advice about marriage, money, and how she should keep herself modest now that she's part of the Whitmore family. By the time she returned, her soul felt wrung dry, but she kept her smile polished. It was a cloudy Tuesday when she officially moved into the Whitmore estate. The house was massive, a French chateau-inspired monstrosity with 15-foot ceilings, oil paintings of dead relatives, and a staff of part-time workers who vanished the moment the family showed up. She arrived in a hired car, her suitcase neatly packed, her outfit simple but tailored. Her husband didn't help her with her bags, he was already inside, apparently called into a quick finance meeting with his brother and father. So she stepped into her new life alone again. Cecilia stood waiting in the foyer, sipping tea from a bone china cup like royalty awaiting a servant. Behind her, Anya leaned against the staircase railing, tapping on her phone, barely looking up. "Ah," Cecilia said, glancing at the clock. "You're here." Her voice had the warmth of a tax audit. "Welcome home," she added with a thin smile that didn't even pretend to be sincere. The bride looked around. "Where should I put my things?" Cecilia turned and gestured toward a hallway. "The guest room, we had the blue one cleaned." The bride blinked. "The guest room? Well, until you two renovate your suite," Cecilia said quickly. "You know, fix it up to your taste. I just thought you'd be more comfortable there. Near the laundry room. Less foot traffic." "Less foot traffic, and more access to the washing machine." The doorbell chimed again. A deliveryman stood there, holding 2 large boxes. Cecilia opened them with a flare of theatrical enthusiasm. "Oh, perfect timing," she said brightly. "Your welcome gift is here." Inside the boxes, a high-end vacuum cleaner and a top-tier mop set with color-coded attachments. "I had them custom ordered," Cecilia beamed. "I know how much you said you liked keeping things tidy." She hadn't said anything of the sort. Anya giggled from the stairs. "You're not working right now, right? So, plenty of time to help around the house." The bride opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. "We just figured," Cecilia continued, already turning away, "with all of us so busy and you being available, you could handle the day-to-day upkeep. We're simple people, darling. We all pitch in here. Simple people with 4 luxury cars, a wine cellar, and a private chef who only cooked for parties." Cecilia placed a condescending hand on her shoulder. "And don't worry, I'm sure you'll figure out the floor plan soon enough. The pantry can be a little tricky. But you'll be spending lots of time in the kitchen, I imagine." The bride stood perfectly still. She had graduated with honors. She had co-founded a startup by 23. She had sat on conference calls with investors from Tokyo and Berlin. And here she was, being handed a mop in a house she partially owned. "Thank you," she said, her voice dangerously even. "Oh, of course," Cecilia chirped. "We believe in making everyone feel useful around here." Later that evening, as she unpacked alone in the guest room, the smallest one in the house, she found a typed list taped to the back of the closet door. "Whitmore family routine. 6:30 a.m. coffee and light breakfast, set table by 6:15. 8 a.m. laundry, folded, color sorted, labeled. 10 a.m. vacuum front parlor, dust library. 1 p.m. prepare light lunch, soup, salad, no garlic. 3 p.m. clean patio, refresh flower vases. 5:30 p.m. prep dinner ingredients, chef arrives at 6. 8 p.m. turn down beds. Please avoid the east wing, in-laws' private space." Her hands trembled not from anger, not yet, but from the sheer absurdity of it all. She bit her tongue until it almost bled. Because for now, she would play along. Smile. Mop. Dust. Fold. But this house wasn't theirs, not entirely. And one day, they would choke on their chore list. Chapter 3, Maid in her own mansion. 3 days after the welcome gift, the illusion of pleasantries was dropped like an old curtain. She woke at dawn, hoping to find a moment alone with her husband, but he had already slipped out of their shared bed. He'd left a note on the side table in his casual scrawl. "Early meeting with Uncle Martin. Don't wait up. Love you." It was signed with a quick heart. A placeholder for affection. She stood alone in the sterile blue guest room, still smelling faintly of furniture polish and lemon disinfectant, wearing a nightgown she'd never imagined scrubbing floors in. Downstairs, the family was already assembled at the breakfast table. Cecilia sipped her coffee like it was vintage wine. Anya scrolled through her phone. The father-in-law, Howard, was buried in the financial section of the paper, grunting occasionally at global market trends. As she stepped into the room, Anya glanced up and smirked. Oh good, she's awake. Cecilia reached into her designer tote and retrieved a clipboard. A literal clipboard. Darling, she said, overly sweet. We've put together a little schedule to help you integrate. Keep things flowing. She handed it over like it was a bouquet of roses. The bride looked down. Weekly chore rotation family contribution schedule. Color-coded. Broken down by morning, afternoon, and evening. Her name was assigned to every box. Monday, strip beds. Wash sheets. Dry on low heat only. Tuesday, vacuum all 3 parlors. Dust piano and top of ceiling fans. Wednesday, wash all bathroom floors, hands and knees only for grout detailing. Thursday, polish silver. Clean wine glasses with lint-free gloves. Friday, clean windows inside and out. Saturday, grocery run. Inventory pantry. Restock snack drawer for Anya. Sunday, deep clean kitchen appliances. Optional, mop garage. Optional? Cecilia pointed to the small footnote in cursive. Remember, a tidy home is a loving home? You understand, dear, Cecilia continued. We all do our part. I handled these things when I first married Howard. Didn't I, sweetheart? Howard grunted. Anya added, it's good for character. You wouldn't want anyone thinking you're just here for the inheritance. The bride smiled thinly. Of course not. Wouldn't want anyone thinking that. She took the clipboard without flinching, turned on her heel, and headed for the supply closet where, to her surprise, her name was now written in chalk on a little blackboard above a caddy of cleaning supplies. For her name, welcome to the family. By lunchtime, she was on her knees in the formal parlor, scrubbing the marble floor with a lemon-scented solution. Cecilia glided through in stilettos, phone pressed to her ear. Oh yes, I adore my daughter-in-law, she gushed to her friend. She's so helpful around the house. I mean, who gets that lucky these days? She walked right past her, tracking a thin line of dirt from her heels across the freshly polished tile. The bride bit down on the inside of her cheek and kept scrubbing. By evening, her hands were raw. She'd vacuumed rooms with rugs she wasn't allowed to walk on, folded towels that would never touch her skin, and ironed linen napkins for a dinner she wasn't invited to join. She ate cold leftovers from a standing position in the kitchen, once the family had finished their wine and retreated to the library. She stood there in silence, surrounded by gleaming countertops and untouched crystal. They treated her like a ghost in her own home, a live-in maid whose silence was assumed, whose presence was tolerated as long as it served them. What they didn't know was that every time she mopped a floor, she also mentally noted the square footage. She knew the cost of every chandelier, the value of the Persian rugs they wiped their feet on, the insurance policy for the grand piano she dusted by hand. Because she owned them. Not metaphorically. Legally. Half of this house, every foundation stone, every antique lamp, every stupid porcelain swan in the china cabinet bore her name in a silent clause filed by her lawyer 2 years ago. They didn't know. Not yet. And that was fine. Let them play house. Let them assign chores. Let them pretend. Because every moment they looked down on her, they were just polishing the floor beneath her throne. Chapter 4, The Closet Audit. It happened quietly, like most insults in the Whitmore household, under the radar, dressed in politeness, dipped in lavender-scented hypocrisy. It was a Thursday morning, 2 weeks into her new life as the family's unpaid domestic ghost. She rose early, determined to reclaim some dignity. Today she would not wear the same threadbare sweats Anya accidentally donated to her closet. Today, she would wear something that reminded her who she was before this house, before the daily vacuuming and whispered insults. She opened the wardrobe in the blue guest room and froze. Gone. Her heels, the stilettos she wore the day she signed her first investment deal, the Louboutins she'd saved for, the elegant nude pumps she wore at the wedding rehearsal, all vanished. In their place, 2 pairs of orthopedic slippers in beige and dusty rose. Her silk blouses, replaced by plain cotton shirts in oversized sizes, labeled with tags from budget department stores she'd never stepped foot in. Her dresses, missing. Her bags, gone. Even her jewelry box had been replaced with a plastic tray containing safety pins, 2 pairs of mismatched socks, and a roll of lint tape. And hanging dead center in the closet, like a badge of humiliation, was a pale blue apron with a floral print and frilly sleeves. Tied to it was a gift tag, written in delicate calligraphy. A little something to wear while working. See. Her stomach turned. She searched the rest of the room. Under the bed. In drawers. Even in the hallway closet. Nothing. Her personal belongings, thousands of dollars worth of curate pieces, had been erased. As if her identity had been deleted, replaced with the image they wanted her to wear. She stormed down the hall and into the main living room, apron clutched in her hand like a weapon. Anya was lounging on the velvet chaise, sipping an iced coffee from a glass tumbler like a scene straight out of a reality show. Her nails were freshly done, her hair curled, her phone camera flipped to selfie mode. Looking for something? Anya asked without looking up. My clothes. My shoes. They're missing. Oh, right, Anya said, stretching. Mom did a little closet cleanup. Said your stuff didn't really fit the house vibe. Don't worry, we donated it to a local shelter. You're welcome. The bride blinked. You donated my... Well, Cecilia said, entering the room with her usual swish of silk. Donated is a generous word. Some of it wasn't really appropriate for housework, darling. Heels? Silk? Honestly, who dresses like that to scrub a toilet? She laughed. Anya joined in. You don't need to dress up to clean, Cecilia added, setting her coffee on the marble counter. Let's keep things practical. The bride stared at the two of them, the perfectly manicured mother and daughter, both gleaming with smugness, radiant in their cruelty. She could practically hear their thoughts. Strip her down. Make her smaller. Make her forget. She clenched her fists so hard her nails left crescents in her palms. I wasn't aware I needed permission to own my wardrobe, she said slowly. Cecilia raised an eyebrow. Let's not be dramatic. It's not like you were wearing anything couture. The bride turned and walked out of the room before the fury could spill from her mouth like acid. Upstairs, she sat on the bed, her fingers trembling, staring at the apron in her lap. It smelled faintly of starch and lavender, innocent enough. But to her, it reeked of control. They wanted her barefoot, silent, invisible. They wanted her in soft cotton and rubber solace. They wanted her dulled down, a compliant little shadow in their big important house. But they had made a mistake. Because those heels, those silk shirts, that gold-plated bracelet engraved with her initials? They weren't just clothes. They were armor. And she hadn't spent years sharpening herself into a weapon just to be stripped down into a maid with a name tag. Let them laugh. Let them play their little dominance games. She'd wear the apron. She'd sweep the floors. But when the time came, she'd be wearing her power in the form of legal signatures and ownership clauses. And no one would laugh when they realized the woman in slippers was also the woman who owned their ceiling. Chapter 5, Dinner with Disdain. The dinner table stretched across the formal dining room like a runway, polished to a mirror's shine, lit by a chandelier the size of a car. Every night, the Whitmores held court here, a regal spectacle of food, gossip, and subtle cruelty disguised as tradition. And now, the bride had a new nightly role. Not as a guest. Not as a hostess. Not even as a family member. But as the cook. It began with a casually delivered announcement from Cecilia one morning while sipping tea and leafing through a home decor magazine. "You have such a delicate palate, dear," she purred. "Wouldn't it be lovely if you prepared our dinners from now on? Just simple meals. 12 people. You're not busy, are you? 12. Every single night. The entire extended family, Howard's brothers, their wives, visiting cousins, neighbors they barely liked, showed up at 7 p.m. sharp for what they called the Whitmore evenings. To them, it was an event. To her, it was a forced performance. She spent hours slicing, braising, roasting, and plating, studying old cookbooks borrowed from the dusty library shelves, Googling how to sear duck breast or fold pastry by hand. Cecilia had conveniently forgotten to offer any help from the house staff. "You need to make the effort to be one of us," she'd said, as if carrying a family name required a souffle and blistered palms. The bride cooked alone, her apron stained with sauces, her hair pinned back, the steam from boiling pots fogging her glasses. The kitchen, once sterile and cold, now smelled of garlic, butter, and silent rage. By the time the doorbell rang and the guests arrived, she was exhausted, coated in a film of oil and resentment. She could hear them laughing, clinking glasses, complimenting the wine selection. The food, always, was praised. "Oh, Cecilia, you've outdone yourself. This lamb is divine. Anya, did you help make this salad dressing?" No one asked who actually made it. And Cecilia never corrected them. But the worst part wasn't the labor. It wasn't even the stolen credit. It was what happened next. She stood by the dining room door one night, finally gathering the courage to take a seat beside her husband, a quiet corner at the end of the table. Her plate was in her hand, simple and modest, not the overflowing delicacies they'd already devoured. She pulled the chair slightly. And Anya's voice rang out. She said, waving her fork. "Maids eat later?" Laughter rippled around the table like poison. Someone chuckled. Someone sipped their wine to hide a grin. She looked at her husband. He was swirling his scotch. He didn't even blink. She waited. 1 second. 2. Surely, he would say something. Surely. He leaned back in his chair and took a bite of his steak. The silence hit harder than any insult. She placed her plate back down on the sideboard, every motion mechanical. Her heart didn't race. Her eyes didn't water. She was long past tears. Past disbelief. She returned to the kitchen without a word, her heels muffled by the marble. She sat alone at the small back table near the pantry, surrounded by dirty pans and leftover broth. Her food was cold. Still, she ate. Not because she was hungry, but because she would not starve in a house she co-owned. They wanted to humiliate her. They wanted her to beg. They wanted her to forget. But every bite she took was a silent vow. They would choke on their laughter one day. And when that day came, she wouldn't be in the kitchen. She'd be at the head of the table. And none of them would be invited. Chapter 6, The Background Check. It was a Sunday, the kind of day Cecilia called casual, which meant everyone still had to dress like they were attending a royal brunch. The family had gathered in the sunroom, sipping cucumber water, complaining about taxes on luxury estates, and debating which of their friends had let themselves go. She was sweeping fallen petals from the hydrangea arrangement by the door when she heard the shrill sound of Cecilia's voice crack from the next room. "Oh! Oh my God!" There was a flutter of footsteps, then hushed excitement. The bride kept sweeping. Cecilia burst into the sunroom with all the subtlety of a soap opera character. In one hand, she held her iPad. In the other, a printout. She fanned herself with it dramatically. "Darling," she said with theatrical concern, turning toward the bride. "Is it true?" The bride blinked. "Is what true?" Cecilia gave a sympathetic chuckle, the kind people reserve for someone who just confessed they grew up in a barn. "I was looking through old press coverage of our wedding, and I found this." She thrust the paper toward her. "An article, from some small town paper. Your hometown. Population 3 cows, I imagine." The headline read, "Local girl weds into Whitmore fortune from cornfields to chandeliers." A grainy photo of the bride from her high school debate championship accompanied the article. In it, she wore second-hand shoes and an oversized blazer, smiling in front of a creaky wooden stage with a banner that read "Welcome to Briar Hill Regional Finals." Anya snatched the paper and gasped. Wait, you're from Briar Hill?" She snorted. "Isn't that the town with the goat parade?" The cousins laughed. "Do you even have a Starbucks there?" one aunt asked. "Did you have to milk your own breakfast?" The bride's lips twitched not into a smile, but into something unreadable. "Yes," she said calmly. "We had goats. Chickens, too. And 3 stoplights in the whole county." Anya leaned back, eyes wide with mock horror. "You're literally a farm girl?" And just like that, the name stuck. That afternoon, they used it like it was a joke only the wealthy could tell. "Farm girl, can you grab more napkins?" "Farm girl, this souffle is falling flat like your hometown?" "Farm girl, remind me to show you how to use a dishwasher without feeding it hay." The bride chuckled along, as if the insults rolled off her like water. Let them laugh. Let them imagine cornfields and goat bells. Because while they giggled at her past, they never once asked about her present. They never asked how she'd left that tiny town with a full-ride scholarship. How she'd graduated at the top of her Ivy League class while holding down 2 part-time jobs. How she co-founded a tech firm at 24 that was later acquired for 8 figures. And they certainly never asked how she met her silent partner, the man who now co-owns several of the Whitmore family's holding companies, including the deed to this very house. They never asked. They just assumed. And assumptions made people sloppy. So she let them believe. Let them roll their eyes at her hick background. Let them joke about tractors and milking pails. Because the day would come, and it was coming soon, when they'd learn. The farm girl didn't just grow up in dirt. She learned how to plant seeds. And she was about to harvest everything they thought was theirs. Chapter 7, Whispers Behind Doors. It started with a scent. Lavender and smoke, the signature perfume Cecilia only wore on important days. The bride had just finished folding linen napkins into perfect swans for another one of the family's endless dinners when she caught the aroma wafting through the air, soft but unmistakable. It drifted in from the east wing, the forbidden territory of the house, marked as private family space. She wasn't meant to go there. So naturally, she followed it. Her steps were silent on the hardwood floors. Years of walking on eggshells had taught her how to move like a ghost. She slipped past the half-open library door, down the corridor lined with oil portraits of long-dead Whitmore ancestors, and toward the drawing room. The heavy double doors were cracked just enough for sound to spill out. And the voices? They weren't whispering anymore. "Once she signs over her share to Mitchell," Cecilia was saying, her voice sharp and clipped, "we're done with her. End of story." The bride froze. Mitchell? Her husband? "Does she even know what she's signed?" asked a man's voice, likely Uncle Martin, the one who always smelled like cigars and had called her sweetheart more times than her own husband ever had. "She thinks the prenup protects her," Cecilia snorted. "Please. That thing's just decoration. Mitchell's been keeping her in the guest room for weeks. She'll cave eventually. These girls always do." "Yeah," Anya chimed in, her voice like nails on glass. Just keep pushing. Make her life a little more uncomfortable, and poof, she'll be gone. Probably back to whatever dirt farm she crawled out of. Another voice, Mitchell's, finally entered the conversation. Give it time, he said, flat and distant. She's prideful, but she'll break. I just have to get her to sign over the equity in the estate trust. Then we're in the clear. The bride stepped back from the door, her heartbeat suddenly very calm. She should have felt rage, betrayal, grief. But she didn't. She felt vindicated. Because what none of them knew, not Mitchell, not Cecilia, not even the family's high-priced lawyer who called her the simple one behind her back, was that the documents she'd signed weren't what they thought. Months ago, before the wedding, when Mitchell had sent her a pile of paperwork for legal housekeeping, she had smiled sweetly, said nothing, and quietly forwarded them to her lawyer. A woman named Elise Singh. Ivy League. Shark in heels. Top 5 corporate litigators under 40. Elise had read every line. Had cross-checked every clause. And then she had slipped in a few pages of her own. Pages that had given the bride legal co-ownership of the estate through a trust jointly funded by one of the bride's silent business entities, a private holding company registered offshore, masked behind 3 layers of proxies. On paper, she was just the young wife. In reality, she was the co-owner of the house the Whitmores called home. Not only that, she was also the senior partner in a property investment group that had quietly purchased over 40% of Whitmore family real estate assets during the last market dip. Cecilia had even congratulated her husband on the mysterious buyer paying top dollar. The irony was so rich, it could buy its own penthouse. And now they were plotting to squeeze her out? Cute. She turned, walked back to her room in silence, and closed the door behind her without making a sound. Later that evening, at dinner, Cecilia smiled at her with sharp teeth. You know, dear, she said sweetly, swirling her wine, we were thinking of having Mitchell take care of some of the estate paperwork soon. Just to simplify things. Would you mind signing a few forms for the family trust next week? The bride smiled back, eyes glittering. Of course, she said. I love paperwork. And then she picked up her fork, cut into her salmon, and imagined the look on their faces the moment they realized she'd already signed something. Something irreversible. Something that made her the one holding the pen, while they scrambled for scraps.
They lied. They cheated. They betrayed the one person who gave them everything. But guess what? The truth always finds a voice, and here, it screams. If you live for chaos, loyalty gone wrong, and revenge served cold, like this video, drop a comment, and hit subscribe, because on Family Drama Unleashed, we don't forgive, and we never forget. Tap that bell, because the next betrayal, it's already on its way.